What's a jerkbait? Sorry to interrupt. I always wanted to ask that question. What does that mean? You
So-
jerk it?
Yeah, that's exactly what you do.
Really?
Yeah. Perfect.
Hello and welcome to the Catch Happy Outdoors show. Today, we're talking about bass fishing. This is October, and we're coming into the fall. We want to know what to do, right? It's winter time. Right next to me is Luke Lipanovich. He is the master. We're lucky enough here at Sweeney Sports, and by the way, we're broadcasting from the shop here at Sweeney Sports, our brand new studio. And Luke worked here for a little while when he was a kid, and as he grew up, he got a real job. And but he continued to fish, win tournaments, and all that stuff. So he's really into bass. And him and I went out. I want to show you some pictures here on the screen. Those of you watching the video, you'll see how we did. My first time literally fishing bass, he put me on some monsters. Anyway, I think those are monsters, but. Anyway, so he's got the expertise, he's got the talent, he's got the background, and what we want to deliver to you today is your fall and winter bass strategy. So Luke, open up with kind of how do you prepare for the winter? Are you like, what is your state of mind? Are you usually kind of a little sad that the best fishery is over, or are you excited for the opportunity?
So I'll tell you what, this time of year, there's nothing to be sad about. There's nothing to look down on. This is a phenomenal time of year. This is a fantastic time to be fishing. These fish, they're preparing for the wintertime. Just like us, we don't like to be cold necessarily. Neither do the fish. They're a cold-blooded creature. So they got to get ready for that cold. They got to bulk up for the winter, and they got to put on their fur coats to sorts, which is to them just bulking up and getting some mass and getting some weight on them. And they can only do that by feeding. So with that, a lot of this time of year is going to be fish that are chasing. They're there to feed. They want to feed. So they're going to be whatever's in their face. They're going to be biting.
So let me ask you this: are they more aggressive than say July, August time frame?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And reason being is because in those summer months, well, do you like being hot? You like going outside and
we're hot now. We haven't had the AC working here yet.
But do you want to go on a run when it's 95, 100 degrees outside? No. Well, neither do the fish. You want to hunker down. You want to get into the shade. So with that, they're going to be less active. So now when you get into the weather like we have now, a lot cooler, you can start stirring around a little bit more and start getting a little bit more active. Well, the fish do the same thing. And like I said, it gets cold in the wintertime for those fish. When the water's, in the mid-high 40s, even the low 50s, a little bit cold for them, they got to get ready for it. So this is the time of year where they got to take advantage before that cold really hits them, and they got to start feeding up and getting ready for that.
So that time of the year is what, October through what, November or something like that, before it gets really cold?
Yeah, so around here, fortunately we don't have those freeze overs like some of those northern states where it becomes completely iced over and the water's in the 30s. So around here, October, November is a great time to get out. That's when that water starts to really cool off. You'll see the water start to turn over, which brings a lot of the bait and all whatever organisms live within a body of water are going to start to rise to the surface to chase that cooler water as that warmer, hot water goes farther down below that thermocline.
Interesting. So we're talking, we're in Napa, California, and let's just talk NorCal here, right? Because I just kind of want to focus, because I think strategies, or I think these strategies kind of generally apply to the whole U.S., or 50 states kind of a thing, or this is more NorCal?
You know what? I'd say to an extent, a lot of these tactics are going to be, nationwide.
Okay.
Now, as far as nationwide goes, it might be at different times. If you're talking about those northern states, as I mentioned, that do ice over, you might start seeing a lot more of these fall transitions in September and October being the later swing. As for us, it's going to be October and November, even into December, depending on time of year and temperatures. You're going to see that more of that fall transition into winter swing.
So let's talk, I guess maybe as you bringing this up, let's talk water temps, right? So people can self-apply, right? Because you go out there, you have your fish finder, you can see what your water temp is, and you can see it on graphs and everywhere else online. So yeah, let's bring up water temps so people can kind of connect to their seasonality. So what are you doing now versus, I guess, what's the difference between what were you doing like 3 weeks ago? What was the last tournament you did?
Over this last weekend.
Okay, in Clear Lake, right?
That was at Clear Lake.
All right, and what did you do there? Did you do anything different than you did in, say, July?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so talk to us about it.
Absolutely.
Give us
So
some secrets.
the difference between July and this last tournament I fished as of last weekend, July, the water temperature was 80 degrees. So those fish don't necessarily want to be active. Like I said, they want to be hunkered down, they want to be in shade, they want to be deep, finding that cooler water, anything that's going to be as most comfortable to them as can possibly be. Like we want to be inside in the air-conditioned house, just like those fish want to be down deeper below that thermocline or in shade lines where it's going to be a lot cooler, to get away from all of that heat. So a lot of my tactics in the summertime are going to be you fish a little bit quick, you fish fast, you fish big baits, something that, they don't want to feed, but if it's something big or something that
opportunistic.
Exactly, really opportunistic, that's something that you're going to want to try to target. Whereas this time of year, I just fished Clear Lake and the water was in the 60s. Now that's a 20-degree drop, which is drastic to a cold-blooded animal. So a lot of those fish are wanting to feed. They need to feed because that water soon enough in a couple months is going to be in the 40s where they're going to be slow. They're going to be lethargic and they don't want to move and they can't move because they are so cold.
Yeah, they can't chase that bait.
Exactly. Now they still will in the wintertime, but this fall transition is one of the best times to try to target those fish that literally have to feed.
I like that you kind of shoulder check me on the, hey, winter is still fishing time. Okay, well let's talk about what were you doing in the tournament? How about we step away from the tournament and talk about October or 60s. When the water is in the 60s, what are you doing?
So there's two types of 60-degree water temps, and the reason I say that is because you have 60-degree water temps in the spring swing and the fall swing. Both times you have completely different behaviors out of the fish, but at the same time, it is a phenomenal time to catch the fish. Now in the spring, that's going to be spawn. So for them, they don't want to feed. They feed right before the spawn when the water is mid to high 50s. But this time of year is a little bit different. They're not spawning. They have to get ready for one of the hardest times of the year for them when they do get really cold. So they need to eat anything and everything to bulk up for that winter time to keep, their metabolism, they don't want to lose any sort of weight or else they're just going to freeze and they get real cold. And trust me, they don't like being real cold.
Right. So what are you doing?
So a lot of the baits that I'm targeting these fish on is baitfish related type of lures. So what I mean by that is a lot of the bait, like I said, I mentioned earlier the turnover. And what the turnover is, a lot of the bait, there's a thermocline in any lake. And that thermocline separates the hot water to the cold water. So what is warm, what does heat do? What's a hot air balloon? Heat rises.
Right.
So what that does is when that surface temperature of the half of the
I didn't know that. That's cool.
the upper half of the water column becomes colder from our cold nights, and it's all night temperatures is the biggest factor to our our water and our turnovers, is that upper half water temperature gets colder than the bottom half of the thermocline's water temperature. So what does it do?
It rises.
It flips.
Okay.
So all the bait that was hanging out in that cooler water from the summertime and all the warmer water is going to come up to the surface, which creates a whole change to the whole entire ecosystem of the lake. And what that does is those fish, anytime bait gets stirred up and bait's on the move, fish are all over them. And
they're hunting.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the best time to be targeting them. So Clear Lake, for example, was in the 60s. So we did see that surface temperature really get to cool off, which those fish are going to be up on the bait, and there's a lot of bait shallow. So to get into a couple baits that I was targeting,
let's do it, man.
Yeah, was my best bait over this last weekend and just years in the past. One of my favorites is the LV500. And that is a bait by Lucky Craft, and if you hear it,
See, I use it for striper, man.
Yeah. Well, you use it for striper because
for sure.
It's loud. You hear that noise.
It's annoying.
And that pisses off the fish, essentially. So this LV500, a lot of times how I'm fishing it is I'm going to cast out and I'm going to let it hit the bottom. And what I'm doing with it most of the time is called yo-yoing. And what that is pretty much just popping it up off the bottom and letting it sink back down. Pretty much you're a dying bait fish, you're a vulnerable bait fish, you're something right in the fish's face that is, it's as simple as all they have to do is just come up to it and suck it right in, because it's, you know, it's not that big of a bait. I mean, if you look compared to my hand, it's a relatively small bait, and it's a perfect shad or any other bait fish imitation with also that noise that's going to piss them off at the same time. So you get kind of the best of both worlds on that bait.
Lucky Craft, okay.
Yeah, another one. I have another Lucky Craft bait here. I'm a big Lucky Craft fan.
Get it closer to the viewers. Yeah, there you go.
So that's going to be a Lucky Craft pointer. It's a jerkbait. It's a pointer 100.
What's a jerkbait? Sorry to interrupt. I always wanted to ask that question. What does that mean? You jerk it?
Yeah, that's exactly what you do.
Really?
Yes. So a jerkbait, and they come in a deeper. This is the pointer 100. That guy there. There's a Stacy also, which has a big long bill on it, almost like a deep diving crankbait. And what you do is they're suspending baits that you want to. Usually, I make a cast. I crank down because it's going to go down to, the pointer goes from anywhere to 3 to 6 feet, whereas the Stacy will go beyond that, anywhere up to 12 feet. And what that is you cast that bait out, reel it down to the depth, and you twitch it like that, you pop your rod in slack, and you just sit there. And you keep doing it. Now, cadence is key as well, and you got to let the fish tell you on that. You can do anything from 1 pop, 2 pops, 3 pops, and let it sit, and this time of year, it can be anywhere from 1 second pops or pauses, and then in the wintertime, you can do 15 to 20 second pauses.
Bass is freaking fascinating, man. I mean, it's like, this is what the jerk is. Is that what we're talking about?
That's literally it. I have a bow in my line as that bait sitting out there, and I pop that bow in the line, and every time I come down on my pop, that's when that bait or the line becomes taut, and that's what makes that bait.
That's what it does. Okay, so it kind of flips. Okay, left and right.
So it's easy. So those fish are going to come up, see that they're going to. Usually, you're fishing above. It's a mid-water column bait. Those fish are going to rise on that bait off the bottom. See it sitting there. Twitch your rod. That bait jumps away from them. That's when they get that reaction strike, and they're going to come and they're going to eat that bait.
So what's the period between the twitches? Like, what is it? You said a second?
Yeah. So you got to let the fish tell you. And like I said, it can be anywhere from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds in between each rip. Or in the wintertime, it could be anywhere from 10, 20, 30 seconds between each rip. Because when it's cold, those fish are a lot slower and more lethargic, as I mentioned earlier. Yeah. So those fish take a lot more time to rise up and come up and actually get to the level of your bait.
So is this kind of what's happening in the striper in the river? Because they're just aggressive right now. We're getting a whole bunch of them.
It's the same exact thing.
Okay.
It is. I mean,
striped bass, right?
It's the same exact concept.
They're so aggressive right now. It's nuts, man.
Yeah.
We're getting 10, 15 fish to the boat in a couple hours.
It's literally, and I can't stress this enough, it's the same exact thing as the stripers right now as well. As those stripers, they're going to get cold too, and they got to feed up for the exact same reason, because they know what's coming, and that's the winter time, and it's going to be a lot harder for them to feed.
Interesting. Okay, so now we're October 60s. We're passing that. So let's move in time, because we don't have, we can spend, freaking 2 hours just to talk about how you fish this bait,
right,
and all the intricacies of it, I'm sure. And then we can go in the boat and show it. We could be all day doing this. But let's just kind of, for the sake of our audience, just give them kind of a little overview. Let's say November rolls in, and it's our November here in Northern California. Could be your, I don't know, could be your October. But the temps go to 60 to 50. Now what?
It's coming, and they know.
So what are you doing then?
Yeah, so realistically, I'm still doing the same things.
Okay.
The same exact things. But I will say, you start to get into a little bit different patterning when that water does get colder, where you can be fishing fish, and you got to also realize every fish is different. Just like a person, every fish is different. So not every fish wants to go and chase down a bait fish or go chase down a jerkbait or my LV500. Some fish want to sit, and they're more lazy, and they're gonna, if a bait comes into their face, that they're more inclined to eat it instead of going and chasing one down. So a couple of baits that I grabbed are going to be, one here is a jig, which is a phenomenal bait for getting big bites this time of year. And another one here is just any sort of worm, really, and that's a Zoom trick worm. And how I'm fishing a trick worm or a jig, fishing on the bottom slow.
Okay.
Simple as that.
So same thing as you and I were doing, kind of what you told me to do, I guess.
Exactly. So I like the jig because the jig is a little bit bigger. You know, you're going to put a cross style trailer on there, and that's more so what you're trying to resemble, because you got to think the crawdads are doing the same thing. The crawdads are getting cold. They're starting to get hunkered down. So any crawdad on the move, those fish are going to take advantage of that. So I'm putting any craw trailer, casting that jig out, and slowly dragging it. The worm is phenomenal, and this is how I make a lot of money fishing these tournaments, is fishing a worm all times of year, but especially when that water starts getting really cold. Now, the worm's great because you can fish it a various amount of ways. I grabbed a trick worm here because that is one of the baits that you can literally do anything with. And when I mean literally anything with, I'll tell you, I can fish on a shaky head. It's a phenomenal way to catch them. And a shaky head is, you know, it's got the weighted head with a screw lock. You rig it weedless. You can fish it in any sort of cover without getting hung up. Another way is a drop shot, which is, you know, your weight's on the bottom. You have the hook up above your line. You put that worm right up there on the hook, and you can keep that up above the bottom, right in the fish's face. Another way to rig this is a niko rig as well, where you are going to put a nail weight into the head of the bait and rig that bait wacky rigged, where you have that hook right in the middle of the bait, and all that is that worm is going to be straight up from nose end, tail up, straight up on the bottom, and it's going to just you twitch your rod and it shakes just right there on the bottom with a little bit more action than the shaky head.
So you guys I'm sure you can look up those different ways to hook a worm online. There's like a million resources that I saw, but it's good to know kind of what is the spectrum of what you should be considering doing with these worms. So that's awesome. Now you have a couple other things out here. Are we still in November?
We're still in any part of the fall. I mean, fall or winter. Another bait here that I have is just a swim bait, and that's a Kitech, which is one of my personal favorites. I have this here in a Tennessee shad color, but to be completely honest with you, it doesn't matter a whole lot.
Really?
Whatever matches your water clarity. This Tennessee shad's phenomenal for ultra clear water, but if I'm in a little bit more stained water, I will be doing a little bit more colors with flash or brighter colors.
What about whiter ones? They seem to entice the striper to bite quite a bit.
Yeah, I don't throw all white.
No?
Hardly ever. Hardly ever. Because
that's interesting. Why is that?
Well, there's no animal in the water.
Oh, I see.
Ever that is completely white. Animals aren't made that way. They're meant to blend into their surroundings, because what bait fish isn't, they're not made to be eaten. They're made to blend in, and you know, they have to survive just like a bass, but a bass is there to eat them. So they're not going to be bright white and bright flashy colors.
That's
because
interesting thinking.
That's very unnatural.
Okay. But yeah, it's funny because we're catching all kinds of, for argument's sake, it's just going to be devil's advocate here. We're catching all kinds of trout and even striper on the tiger pattern, you know.
Right.
Chartreuse, super
right.
bright. How does that even work, man?
So I'll tell you.
Why are they going for this bright stuff? Pink?
I'll tell you exactly why. It's a completely different fish.
I see. Okay, so there's similarities and there's definitely differences.
So you can absolutely catch bass on an all-white swim bait. I'm not saying you can't whatsoever, but I can guarantee you your odds are significantly lower to catch a big one, because
I think that's a huge takeaway of this show, guys. If this is one thing you got to take out of this one, don't throw stuff that don't exist.
Exactly, because big ones they're big for a reason. They're smart, right? Striper are a vastly more aggressive fish than a largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass. Spotted bass are aggressive. They'll eat that, but they're not getting as big as some of these largemouth that we have in some of these lakes. Stripers, I'll tell you what, they'll eat anything.
So here's the difference, I'll tell you guys from personal experience. Here's the difference from a tournament level fisherman and a fisherman. Okay, a fisherman wants to catch. Sorry, I'm hitting the mic. A fisherman wants to catch fish. A tournament fisherman wants to catch a bigger fish.
And you need
and so, yeah, I catch fish. I catch like 18, 20, 30, not 30, 23-inch stripers on a white swim bait. But because the river, Napa River here, is super stained, and it seems to work, but not always. And I've seen these Kitex work really well too on a striper, really well, and they're not white. So that's like I'm learning all the time, learning a lot. Hopefully you are too. So let's round this out, Luke. What once we get to the deeper winter here, man, December, January, February, like it seems like all you want to do is crawl into your freaking man cave and watch Super Bowl. Let's say it's not Super Bowl weekend and you want to go fishing. What are you doing?
Well, I'm sure those fish want to watch the Super Bowl just as bad as we do.
49ers going to be there, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping so. Yeah, the winter time, to a lot of people, I feel like they get a little bit intimidated by it. You know, you go out on the lake and it looks dead. You know, you don't see the fish jumping like you do in the summertime. You don't see any action on the surface. You don't see any of that. But I can promise you this, you can catch them. And personally, the wintertime is my favorite time of the year. That's when I seem to do the best, regardless if it's a tournament, regardless if it's me going there and having fun. I catch the most big ones in the cold weather months. And like I said, they're all of what I just explained, how to catch them with the baits that I've mentioned.
You doing the same?
Do the same thing. You can do the same thing. You just fish them a little bit differently. You fish slower. You know, you don't need to be real fast. Like I said, with a jerkbait, ripping it like how you fish it. You're going to have your longer pauses. You're going to have your 10, 15, 20, even 30-second pauses.
Wow.
Instead of your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-second pauses. The LB500, working it on the bottom, not ripping it real hard off the bottom. Just a slight pop or a drag, almost like fishing a jig.
So, like this versus...
Yeah, because you want to keep that bait right in their face. If it's jumping all up over their head, well, there's no organism in the water that has that energy because they're all cold-blooded. None of them are going to be moving that fast. It's unnatural.
Oh, God. I'm liking this, man. I'm liking what I'm learning today. All right, so I think this was fantastic, Luke. Thank you very much for coming, man. I really appreciate your time and effort, man. If you guys have questions, put it down in the comments. If you're listening on the audio and you're on your work commute, hopefully you made it safe to work. Maybe next time we'll have a longer one or shorter one. Give us some feedback of what you think. Give us a review. And look, Luke is an excellent fisherman. If you guys are around Napa, swing by, stop by Sweeney Sports, say hello. Luke might pop in, might catch him, ask him questions. Until then, thank you very much for watching and listening, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you. Good luck.